Well, this is a tag team, so acknowledgement has already been given to the traditional owners of the land and people here. I won't go through that again because it's been said by Sue on behalf of both of us. I'd just like to indicate that there is the good and there is the not so good and the bad, and there is certain fight backs going on around this country to make things better, and I'd like to talk about all of those quickly. I'm very conscious that John Condon's in the room, and a lot of these data haven't come from John's work. He's done excellent work, but all these data are very consistent, I believe. That first slide shows the incidence of breast cancer in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women in green, and you can see that overall, down at the bottom, I don't have a pointer, I'll do it with my finger, that there is a lower overall, whoops, now.
Touch the screen.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, I mustn't touch that screen. There's about a 21% lower incidence rate in Aboriginal women for breast cancer, and you see that that applies in all age groups except one, the 65 to 74-year-olds, which we can discuss at coffee, why that's different. It's an aberration due to screening. So, a lower risk of being diagnosed with breast cancer, but below that we have the mortality rate, a higher mortality rate from breast cancer, about 29% higher, and that applies to all age groups over 55 years of age. So less risk of getting it, but more chances of dying of it is the unhappy story. And that's obviously translates into lower survival rates. So Aboriginal women have poorer survival outcomes. Overall, about 70% will survive to 5 years from diagnosis, and this is from deaths of any cause. So it includes comorbidity if they die of that, and that compares with 81% for the non-Aboriginal population. So there's your gap, and the gap applies in all age groups. It also applies whether we're talking about people in major cities, where the difference is quite small, or in any area. In remote and very remote areas, quite a stark difference. In fact, what really comes home to me here is if you're not an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person, your survival rates are pretty much the same, irrespective of where you live. But if you're an Aboriginal person, Torres Strait Islander person, the further away you go, the lower survival. So distance seems to have a crueler effect on the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander population compared with others. This is a epidemiological gobbledygook, but what a hazards ratio can be interpreted as is the ratio of case fatality, putting it crudely. So this slide shows that Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander women have a twofold risk of dying of breast cancer compared with other people with breast cancer who aren't Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander, and that's after taking into account the age differences and where they live. Even if you look at Aboriginal women who've been through the screening program, they don't screen as frequently for reasons that the Aboriginal women themselves can tell us, probably. And their tumours are found through their life. This is a screening group of women passing through their lives, are still found when they're larger. They are more likely to have mastectomies, more likely to die of their cancer, and that's within the screened group. Okay, so that one, I need to go backwards there. How do I go backwards? This one?
No, I have to do this.
Okay, now I want everyone to memorise this, and because you'll be tested on it afterwards. I know this looks a mess, but in South Australia we're trying to do something very different, I think. We have a group of, we have a partnership grant from the NHMRC, but we don't expect this to be just a grant and a study. We expect it to be an ongoing, more advanced cancer monitoring system. And what we have is a steering committee over this. It's predominantly Aboriginal people. The lead CIA on the grant is an Aboriginal person. But it's not just Aboriginal people, we also have non-Aboriginal people there. People like me getting in the way and adding confusion to the exercise. But we have a partnership with South Australian Health Department, with the Aboriginal Health Council, Cancer Council, so it's a broad statewide effort. And what we are doing is making sure, first of all, that the cancer registry is brought up to speed, and we've identified Aboriginal people on that registry, that the cancers are staged, so we can look at differences in stage, and we're linking the cancer registry up with administrative data sets to look at differences in screening, coverage, and looking at patterns of treatment so that we can see what Aboriginal people are getting in terms of what they should be getting from a technical point of view. The thing that's really come home to me, because I wasn't as conscious of this until recently, was that Aboriginal people put an enormous store on how they're treated as human beings in the system. If I go to treatment, I just worry that the technical quality is all right and they treat me halfway decently. I think because of history and culture or whatever, Aboriginal people feel very strongly about the way they're treated as human beings and the environment they're in. So added to this linkage system, which has incidentally been done in a way to make sure there's protection of the privacy of the individuals, because out of it comes a de-identified linked data shell, we also have self-reporting by Aboriginal people with cancer about not only about their experience with their cancer, but experience with the health system. Now we're doing this across the state with a view to using those data for targeting, but also not just for stats, because these are all, every stats is a human being. We want to improve the situation so that we can target problems and that emerge in that linkage system, and we can also empower the Aboriginal people with that information so that they can serve this up to the system and get the response, hopefully, that they need. So that's what we're doing. Now, it's early days yet. We've only started this year. So if we look at the first 56 pairs of breast cancers that have come through, looking at Aboriginal, non-Aboriginal people, we see what we'd expect. Fewer localised cases amongst the Aboriginal people. We also see that this was likely to be largely due to access. In our state, 53% of Aboriginal women with breast cancer came from outer regional and remote areas, and this is from the early data coming through. So obviously there are access issues there. In terms of survival, there's a huge difference in survival from breast cancer, with 91% of non-Aboriginal women, 61% of Aboriginal women in these early cases that we've got surviving to 5 years. And we see it's not just because these cancers are found late, within stage, the Aboriginal people don't do as well. So in localised cases, 97% of non-Aboriginal people survive 5 years, but only 80%, based on these early figures I keep pointing out, of Aboriginal people survive that long. So it's just a gap that really is quite stark and distressing, because we're talking about human beings here. I hope these figures don't hold in the long term, because at the moment, non-Aboriginal people with non-localised disease are doing roughly as well as Aboriginal people with localised disease. So we're hoping that that's an early aberration in the data, but it has serious implications, and we just can't put up with this sort of thing any longer in this country. We have to do something about it. So our figures are based on small numbers still, but if you pick up data anywhere around the country, and as I've deferred to John earlier with the great work he's doing nationally and has done so in the Northern Territory, we see similar figures. Obviously we see, knowing the circumstances in which Aboriginal people, we see more of them living in the poorer areas. We see the same mix of degree of spread, with fewer localised cases being found amongst Aboriginal people. And we see more comorbidities amongst Aboriginal people, diabetes and renal disease and so many other things, and that of course compromises treatment. And interestingly, differences in histology types with
Almost none.
Sorry?
Almost none.
Almost no differences. The differences are there, but they're quite small. I have seen more ductal in other settings as well. So I guess the bottom line is more likely to be diagnosed at a later stage if you're an Aboriginal woman with breast cancer, less likely to have had breast screening, more comorbidity on board that compromises your health and probably the treatment, and more likely to be disadvantaged with worse survival. Now, we want to be able to put the treatment around this and the stories around this as well. And if we can pull this thing off in South Australia and have something in that small state where things are quite manageable and can make a difference there, we want to strut this around Australia and see if you guys can outdo us, because we think that this is a way that we can put data to work for health system change, basically. So thank you.